Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Psalms in Hebrew and Comparative Translations. And welcome to Diana, who is new this week to our class. And every class is a standalone class, so you don't have to feel like um, you're missing something by having missed the first 62 sessions. And of course, they're all recorded. So if you'd like to go back, or if you'd like a particular sampling of them, I'm happy to give some of my favorite Psalms from the first 62 that you can look at. Um, and uh, we are we're up to Psalm 63. The the pattern of how we run the class is that we read the psalm out loud in Hebrew so that everybody can hear what it sounded like in its original. And then we read several different translations. I provide 10, and each week I pick two or three that we read, although the packet includes all 10. So if you see something in a different translation that you think would be interesting, you're welcome to say, can we look at, this other translation, or I noticed this phrase is translated differently. Um, so after we look at the different translations, the first question that we ask ourselves is, what is the emotional tenor of this psalm? What does it make us feel? What what do the images and poetry of this psalm evoke in us? And what do we think the person who wrote this psalm must have been feeling when they wrote it? And then we ask the question, if you are going to use this psalm in your spiritual practice as a prayer or as a spiritual meditation, what in what context would you use it? What would you be praying for if you invoked the words of this psalm? And so we're going to jump into Psalm 63. And I'm going to share my screen so that you can see the words of the psalm. All right. Then I forgot to say, after we talk about how the psalm makes us feel and how we would use it, then we look at how the psalm is actually used in the Jewish liturgical tradition, and if anything, if it's used at all. We have had a sort of the Psalms of the 50s and 60s are less used in the Jewish liturgical tradition than some of the earlier Psalms that we looked at. So anyway, and we look at how the psalm is used. If it's used in whole, we look at that, and if it's used in part, meaning verses from the psalm is taken, we look at how those verses are used, and we ask the question, when the rabbis take this verse into the Jewish liturgical canon, do they import with the verse the rest of the sense of the psalm, or are they specifically avoiding the rest of the psalm and focusing on that verse in particular? All right, so Psalm 63. Mizmor leDavid, Bioto b'midbar Yehuda. Elohim Eli, Ata Ashreka, Tzama lecha nafshi, Kamah lecha besari, Be'eretz tsiya ve'ayef bli mayim. Kain bakodesh chaziticha, lirot uzchav uchvodecha. Kitov chastecha mi chayim, sefatai yishabchuncha. Kain avarechacha bechayai, bishimcha esa chapai. Kmo halev vadeshen tisba nafshi, v'siftei renanot yehalel pi. Im zecharticha al yitzuai be'ashmurot egebach. Ki hayita ezrata li uvetzel knafecha aranin. Davka nafshi acharecha bi tamcha yeminecha. Vehema l'shoah yivakshu nafshi yavo betachtiot haaretz. Yagiruhu al yedei charev minat shu'alim yiyu. Vehamelech yismach belohim yitalel kol hanishba bo ki yisacher pi dovrei shaker. A psalm of David when he was in the wilderness of Judah. God, you are my God. I search for you. My soul thirsts for you. My body yearns for you as a parched and thirsty land that has no water. I shall behold you in the sanctuary and see your might and glory. Truly, your faithfulness is better than life. My lips declare your praise. I bless you all my life. I lift up my hands invoking your name. I am sated as with a rich feast. I sing praises with joyful lips when I call you to mind upon my bed, when I think of you in the watches of the night. For you are my help, and in the shadow of your wings I shout for joy. My soul is attached to you. Your right hand supports me. May those who seek to destroy my life enter the depths of the earth. May they be gutted by the sword. May they be prey to jackals. But the king shall rejoice in God. All who swear by God shall exult when the mouth of liars is stopped. We'll turn to the contemporary English version, which is a Christian translation of the Book of Psalms. A Psalm of David when he was in the desert of Judah. And then this translation gives us a title for each psalm. The titles are not original to the psalm. This title is God's Love Means More Than Life. You are my God. I worship you. In my heart, I long for you as I would long for a stream in a scorching desert. I have seen your power and your glory in the place of worship. Your love means more than life to me, and I praise you. As long as I live, I will pray to you. I will sing joyful praises and be filled with excitement like a guest at a banquet. I think about you, God, before I go to sleep, and my thoughts turn to you during the night. You have helped me, and I sing happy songs in the shadow of your wings. I stay close to you, and your powerful arm supports me. All who want to kill me will end up in the ground. Swords will run them through, and wild dogs will eat them. Because of you, our God, the king will celebrate with your faithful followers, but liars will be silent. And one final translation, the Koren Tehillim translation by Eli Cashton. Psalm of David when he was in the wilderness of Judah. God, you are my God. Eagerly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My body longs for you, like a parched and weary land that has no water. So do I long to see you in the sanctuary and to behold your power and glory, for your loving kindness is better than life itself. Therefore, my lips will sing your praises. Thus I will bless you all my life. In your name I lift up my hands in prayer. My soul is satisfied as with the richest of foods. My mouth shall praise you with joyous lips. When I lie in bed, I remember you. Through the watches of the night, I think of you. For you have always been my help. In the shadow of your wings, I sing for joy. My soul clings to you. Your right hand supports me. May those who seek to destroy my life sink into the depths of the earth. May they be given over to the sword and become the prey of foxes. But the king shall rejoice in God. All who swear by him shall glory, while the mouths of liars will be stopped. So, reactions, responses. What is the emotional tenor of this psalm? Rosalie, you have to unmute. Yeah.
Uh, my favorite is the contemporary English version from 1995.
Yeah.
Um, I just feel that is much more immediate and poetic. It has a certain a strike to it, especially in the last three verses that I think they really hit home.
All right. So what uh what resonated with you in that translation emotionally that didn't resonate in in the other translations?
Um, in particular, where it says, "But liars will be silent."
Mm-hmm.
I think that I think that's an amazing statement in our times. I would like all the liars to be silent, but they're not.
Yeah.
And
They've all got podcasts.
yes, they
That
exactly,
podcast,
exactly.
right?
And I do love swords will run them through and wild dogs will eat them. I just think if you had to say it, that's the most concise way of doing it.
Great, great. So look, I mean, I the reason why I bring all of these different translations is because I think it's helpful to see how the translators are struggling with the they want to have the Hebrew, they want to be faithful to the sense of the original, and they also want it to feel like meaningful to the meaningful to the readers, right? So one of the translations says the those who speak lies shall be muzzled, right? Or the mouth of liars is muzzled, as opposed to is silenced or is stopped, right? The way that they're trying to translate this word ki yisacher p dovrei sheker. Dovrei sheker are the ones who speak lies, right? So you can translate that the ones who speak lies, or you can translate that the liars. And I agree with you that ones who speak lies might be a more literal translation of dovrei sheker, but it has the exact same meaning as liars. So you can just simplify and call those people liars. But ki sacher pi means for the mouths, pi is mouths, for the mouths of those liars will be yisacher. And yisacher means stopped up or blocked or muzzled, right?
Mm,
And so to when you translate it as, the liars will be silenced, I do absolutely think that that's what it means to muzzle a liar, is to silence them. But you also lose there that sense of the physicality of what's going on, right? Silenced could mean lots of different things. Muzzled means like they really can't speak because their mouth is blocked.
mm,
And the sense of the Hebrew is that their mouth is blocked, which and when you're translating poetry, I mean translating anything, every translation is an interpretation. I agree that the plain sense of what that image is to silence someone. But how you silence someone might change your visceral reaction to it. If you're silenced by being muzzled, that's different from silenced by being killed, for example, or by being put in jail, or, like there are a lot of ways to silence other people. And muzzled is such a evocative uh image. Yeah, Larry.
I think the bulk of the psalm really comments on that. Here's a guy who's being troubled because people are telling falsehoods about him, and it's a real issue on his mind because bad things have got to happen to these guys to pay him off. And the entire psalm is not about that. The psalm is about his focus on God, his love of God and his seeking for God and his longing for God and his satisfaction with God, his joy in God is all he's talking about. And that's what's muzzled the liars. Instead of focusing on all the problems and these horrible people who are doing these things, he's focusing on God, which puts things in perspective. His love of God and focus on God muzzles the impact of the liar speaking. And he has absolute trust that God is going to work this thing out.
Yeah, by saying, I will praise your name as long as I live. I will be fully satisfied with with the richest of foods that you're providing me. I think about you all the time, even when I'm sleeping, right? That um trust and faith and intention and focus on God is what is going to muzzle or silence the liars, right? The I also think that there's something about the physicality of that image that connects back to the first verse of, I my soul thirsts for you, my body longs for you, my body is like a dry land where there is no water. Something about the that image feels like also in the throat, right? So that at the beginning and at the end, right, he is parched. The he is parched by thirsting for God, and the liars are parched or muzzled, or their throat is blocked up because they too fail to have that relationship with God, with truth, with loving kindness. So I do think that there's something to do with that. Of course, also the poet is writing in the wilderness of Judah, right? In the desert. And so he's looking out at the landscape itself and saying, "Ah, I'm just like these hills that are parched for water," right? Like I too am thirsty, just as these hills are thirsty. So taking a step back, when we read this psalm, what emotion do we get from it?
I get a kind of relief
Say more
that
about that.
that in a way it's sort of a looking for, in a way, I think he's looking for the
Mm-hmm.
presence and sort of explaining that he sees it when he goes to the sanctuary, and ultimately this is what he really hopes for. So I think it's hoping, but I think it's a relief that he does say, "You have helped me," at one point. So
Yeah.
there's gratitude there.
Yeah. My being is sated as though I were fed the most succulent meats, right?
It,
My being is sated. That
gratitude.
that sense of being satisfied, of being sated, that is the relief that you're talking about, right? Why do I feel relief? Why do I feel gratitude? Why do I feel a sense of satedness, of satisfaction, of fullness? Because you, God, have been a help to me, because I have been in the shade of your wings, because my being clings to you, right? All of these things are the reason why I feel a sense of gratitude. I feel a sense of satedness. And yet it ends with this uh strong prayer against the enemies, right? This whole psalm has this beautiful imagery of yearning for God and being sated by God, and yet it ends with these enemies. It's interesting, right? Like some of the Psalms that we've looked at, you got those enemies come at the beginning, and then by the end, you have this sense of satisfaction or relationship or relief in God. And here it sort of feels like it's the other way around. What do you think, Barry? Oh, you have to unmute, unless you don't have anything to say, which is also fine. I have to say, all summer when you're up at the camp and you come to Psalms class from your lake, I am jealous of your view. And it's such a beautiful day today.
I've been out on my pedal board, paddling and thinking good thoughts.
That's
And
fun.
and I think that's part of this psalm is I think it's reduced the problem of his foes to a trivial mention at the end and saying, and by the way, no problem. They're going to be wiped out. They will be muzzled and people will see them knocked down. Uh, Everything is in perspective when I am here in the wilderness and thinking of you, Lord. And I am satisfied. I'm at peace even though I'm in the wilderness because they've chased me here and
Yeah.
they're trying to kill me.
Yeah.
It's just a perspective is just marvelous. And I think it is exactly that. Instead of starting with the enemies and God will get them, I am satisfied. Oh, and by the way, those guys that chased me out here are going to get it in the neck.
Yeah, so right. So David is fleeing from Saul. He's in Midbar Yudah in the wilderness, the desert of Judah. And that means he's not super far away, right? Like you can one of the one of the most beautiful nights of my life was when I was in rabbinical school and living in Israel for a year. I I heard that my cousin's youth group was doing a night hike from their West Bank settlement near Bethlehem to the Dead Sea on the night of a full moon. Uh, like I don't know, like a 30-kilometer hike or whatever in the middle of the night. And I asked if I could come along, like it was a bunch of teenagers, Israeli teenagers, and me, and like the guide who was running the hike. And um we left at midnight after the full moon rise, and
Mm.
we walked from midnight till 8 a.m. from the from the outskirts of Jerusalem to the Dead Sea. Uh and then we got a bus back from the Dead Sea to back to Jerusalem. And it was through that's the desert. That's the desert that David is talking about here. Like that's Midbar Yudah. And it was so quiet and peaceful and could see so many stars. And also it was just very powerful to be a, like like he describes, like longing for connection with God and feeling that sense of peace and connection in the wilderness. Yeah, it's very powerful. A lot of people find it meaningful or powerful to connect to God in the wilderness.
How did you go through the desert? I mean, what route did you take?
We just, I mean, the we had a guide, but basically, Midbar Yudah is a whole bunch of hills, and most of the time we were walking sort of along the the first thing that we did was we went through the wadi. Okay, so it was like a big downhill, and then we walked in the base of the wadi for a while, and then uphill on the other side of the wadi. And then it was a lot of like walking around the hills. Um, you know, uh, uh, and we stopped for um We saw some camels that were just like parked there in the middle of the desert. We went around them because we didn't want to, you're not supposed to disturb what's there. And obviously, those camels belong to somebody, Bedouins or whatever. We didn't want to get to mess with that. So we like skirted the camels. And when as the sun was coming up, we climbed like the highest hill that was around where we were, and we watched the sun come up over the Dead Sea. And then that must have been like 6:30 or something a.m. And then the last hour and a half was really, really hot. And then we got to the Dead Sea. Yeah, the middle of the night part of the hike was great.
Wow.
The last hour and a half, I think they were aiming for us to get to the Dead Sea by sunrise, but it took longer than they expected.
Mm.
Yeah. That always happens when you're with a whole group of teens. Yeah. It was really cool. I was very grateful that my cousins let me come along with their B'nai Akiva group.
One of the most special things about being up at the lake is that we love sitting down by the water and just contemplating nature and the beauty of nature. We love when there's no sound around except the animals and the birds that we hear, and we can just sit there and meditate the presence of God. And if there's ever a question of whether there is a God, all you have to do is sit up here and just admire God's work.
Thanks. Yeah, Barry, that feels very similar to the message of the psalm,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Here we are in the wilderness. I mean, your wilderness is not a parched desert, but
No,
No,
instead a lush and green, lake in upstate New York. But both of these are have similar uh sense of being in relationship to God in the wilderness. All right. So, liturgical uses of our psalm. As with many of our psalms that we've been looking at, uh, this psalm is not used very much in the Jewish liturgical tradition. But interestingly, verse 6 is which open your eye, take my prayer like a rich feast, right? That verse, um, the concept of the rich feast is paraphrased in this prayer, which interestingly is used on Shivat Tammuz, which was just last week. It's the fast day of 17 Tammuz. And I gave you the words here so that you could hear how the poet of the prayer crafted the prayer. It's like it rhymes and scans. Ayin pekach tefilati kach kemo chelev hamdushan. And if you read all of the verses of this prayer, what you find is that the first two phrases rhyme, and then the last phrase is a quote from Psalms that proves or that contextualize. It's like a proof text for the for that section. So open your eye, take my prayer like a rich feast. Like a rich feast is from our psalm, or it's a paraphrase of our psalm. Uh, okay, and then the concept of being in the shadow of your wings, which is not just from this psalm, but it is mentioned in verse 8 of this psalm. That phrase of being betzel knafecha, that phrase is used all over the penitential prayers for minor fast days and for the season of repentance for leading up to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So one example of that is in the shadow of your wings, B'tzel knafecha, we will take refuge and plead, like the day when Adonai descended in a cloud. So that phrase from verse 8, in your wings shadow, in the shade of your wings, that phrase is very common in Jewish prayer. But this isn't the only psalm where that phrase occurs. So it's hard to say whether those usages are a paraphrase of this psalm or whether it just happens that this psalm has that same imagery that is picked up. But I figured why not bring it because I think it's part of this. Now, one thing that's really interesting, I always look for liturgical uses. Like how is this psalm used in our prayers? But one thing that jumped out at me while I was studying this psalm is that even though the psalm isn't used very much in our prayers, it is absolutely used in a discussion about Jewish prayer in the Talmud. And that's because this psalm actually is rather prayerful. Um, and because the phrase, my mouth declares praise, also the phrase, I lift up my palms, both of those phrases um, feel like phrases that are evoking prayerfulness. So we have this Talmudic discussion of prayer, and Rabbi Elazar says, Amar Rabbi Elazar, my dichtiv kain avarecha b'chayai b'shimcha esachapai. What is the meaning of this verse from Psalm 63? I bless you all my life. I lift up my hands invoking your name. Okay. Kain avarecha b'chayai. I bless you all my life refers to the recitation of the Shema, right? So our Jewish prayer service in the morning, it has two big sections. Like the main chunk of prayer, it has the recitation of the Shema and the blessings which surround it, and the Amidah, the standing prayer with the 18 blessings, right? So this verse, Kain avarecha b'chayai, that refers to the recitation of the Shema, and B'shimcha esakapai, that refers to the Amidah prayer, which is characterized as lifting up one's hands to God. And if one does so, that is, if you recite the Shema in the morning, if you pray by reciting the Shema, then you get the reward described in verse 6. Then you feel sated as with a rich feast, right? And not only do you receive the sense of satisfaction in this world, but you also receive the a you also receive a reward in the world to come. And so verse 6, Kamochele vadeshen tisba nafshi, like a rich feast, my soul is satisfied. Okay. And then the second part of that verse, Visifte rinanot yalel pi, Visifte rinanot. Why does it say with lips of joys rather than with lips of joy? Rinanot is a plural verb, a plural noun. Why rinanot and not rina? Right? Sifte rina would make perfect sense with lips of joy. So why rinanot? Why is that word plural? And so the plural joy, says the Talmud, refers to the joy in this world and the joy in the world to come. You could just say Siftei Rinanot is just poetic language, right? Like you could say, yeah, it could be Siftei Rina, but the poet decided to use Rinanot because Rinanot is, if one Rina is good, then multiple joys are better, right? Like it means the same thing. Like joy and joys, like multiple joys, it doesn't change the meaning of the verse. Now you could say sifte is plural, like because it's both of your lips. So maybe the poet was just in the plural mode. Sifte note, the lips of joys. But you could just as easily say the lips of joy. Sifte rina. That would work just as well. Anyway, the rabbis always have a close reading of the text. If the text is going to have a plural when the plural wasn't necessary, they're going to try to understand what that means. Anyway, how I feel about this is in the middle of this kind of beautiful poem about loving God and experiencing God in the desert and thirsting for God the way that the land thirsts for rain, are these two verses about like blessing God and praising God and raising up your hands in prayer. And the rabbis, or at least Rabbi Elazar, uses these two verses to say that the experience of daily prayer is uh, joyful and creates a sense of satedness, of satisfaction, not only in this world, but also in the world to come. So I thought that was pretty. Mark.
Um, I thought the first part was uh, was really beautiful and praising God and saying nice things, and then the last two or three verses kind of crashes down on the reality of of his fate with his enemies, and I thought that was kind of jarring contrast.
Yeah, I mean there's right Larry had suggested that maybe by putting it in that order it it's like saying the enemies are an afterthought. The enemies are unimportant the relative to my relationship with God, right? And another way to think about it is the way that we first talked about it at the very beginning, which is to say, yeah, there are enemies and they're going to be silenced. And what silences them is my faith in God. What silences them, what muzzles them, what what they're going to get what's coming to them because I have this satisfaction and this faith in God. So the what's really important is that part of it. And the enemy is sort of an is is a less important part. But I agree with you that when you're reading this psalm, it's like all this high, lofty, beautiful words, and the enemies are really going to get it right at the end. Yeah. All right, Larry.
If you were trying to communicate to someone that the world to come is happening now, as the world that is happening now in this world is happening, that they are both superposed one on top of the other, you would write a psalm like this.
Hmm. Say more about that.
These two worlds, we think about the world to come as a future not happening now. But if it's eternity, it's happening now, as this is happening now. They're both happening together. It's all happening at once. If you were trying to communicate that thought, I think this would be a way to say it. There's no way to say it because it's an alien concept to us. Things have to antecede and post. You, we have our logic, which is very limited, of course. And if you were trying to elevate us out of our logical way of looking at the world as a rational thing and think about reality, that this is, Plato's cave, that this is a shadow of what is. You would do it by ordering it this way and with that kind of an emphasis, I think. The emphasis on the world to come, which you are experiencing now, which is nicely crowding out the jarring little world of reality of today. And you're also concluding it with this lovely thing that's going to work out. So why worry about it?
Nice.
I think
Yeah.
that's the spiritual component is well described in the very end of the material you sent us, Rabbi.
Yeah.
The Rabbi Richard Levy says something to what Larry was just talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I can read that. So I really like Rabbi Richard Levy's um commentary on Psalms, which is this book, Songs Ascending, the Book of Psalms, a New Translation. And Rabbi Richard Levy wrote his own translation to all of the Psalms with commentary. And his commentary, it has two parts. It's a verse by verse commentary where he talks about what the words mean, but also about how he picked particular translation choices. And then at the end he puts spiritual applications. And I usually include his spiritual applications in our class because in part it was reading this book that gave me the idea for the format of this class, of thinking about how we can use these Psalms in our own spiritual lives. And Psalms have been used in the spiritual lives of Jews and Christians for thousands of years. And the recitation of Psalms is often offered as a spiritual resource. But in my experience, at least, of Judaism, people say, okay, recite these Psalms, say um while you're praying for a particular thing or a particular outcome or whatever, here are some, six Psalms that you can recite. But then it's sort of just like muttering the words in Hebrew without really diving deep into them. So Rabbi Richard Levy says about this Psalm, the verses of longing at the beginning of this Psalm and in verse 9 reflect beautifully the sentiments of a person who has had experiences of God's presence, but who now feels the lack of them, or who is urged on by past experiences to desire more. To awake in the morning and translate the freshness of a new day into a desire to embrace the Creator of the dew still glistening on the grass is to truly sense oneself as a person newly born, newly alive. An alternative experience arises when we feel the world around us as dry and sereh, weary, even as we are weary. Then we need to translate the thirst we feel not for water, but for the spiritual waters of the living God. The first step in this scenario is to be aware of the dryness in one's spirit, the weariness that longs for a splash of life over one's being. That splash can propel us forward into an experience of holiness, transforming the place we are into fragrant towering trees by a lake or an ocean, in a hushed synagogue, beneath a snow-capped range of mountains. We might want to chant two verses of this psalm. The life breath of me thirsts for you, the flesh of me grows faint for you. In holy places I have had visions of you, looking upon your power and your glory. The life breath of me thirsts for you, the flesh of me grows faint for you. In holy places I have had visions of you, looking upon your power and your glory. Close your eyes. You may see such visions too. Yeah, I do like that.
Yes, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, maybe someday I'll get to meet that guy, Richard Levy.
You already may have.
Yeah, that is also possible. That is also possible. Yeah. Yeah, so he doesn't in this, spiritual applications with regard to this psalm, he doesn't address the issue we were just talking about, which is that the end of the psalm feels a little discordant with the uh with the other with the other parts. Um and in fact, in his translation, he put those verses in italics and he writes, "We have placed these verses in italics to emphasize the radical shift in the poet's mood from praise to revenge.
Mhm.
Yet those who long to liquidate my life, a more literal translation of the Hebrew is, but those who seek the total destruction of my life." And the word here is shoah. Shoah means total destruction, uh, uh, Holocaust, right? And so he tried to capture that sense of total destruction by using the word liquidate. And um and the ending, he writes, while this psalm's ending is somewhat surprising, it is called a psalm of King David, after all. The contrast seems to be between the petty beings who seek the poet's destruction and the noble monarch who, like the poet, sees his life centered on God. And then he he picked the word muzzled in part to try to capture the alliteration with the word with mouth, because he's trying to he's trying to capture the sense of the Hebrew where it says key and p rhyme. So he couldn't figure out a way to rhyme it, but he decided to use alliteration to connect those words. Uh, anyway, when you read his description of each choice, he's uh a very thoughtful translation. His choices occasionally go against the grain. His translation choices occasionally go against the grain of, the way that many other scholars translate the words, right? It's part of why I give so many translations. Robert Alter, his translation is a very, very well researched academic translation. And he also ends up with the word muzzled. But in general, I've found that while I really like Alter's translations for understanding the Hebrew, I don't really love them as poetry. And I think so. I think Alter's translations of prose are better than his translations of poetry. But again, I sort of feel like who am I to look at Robert Alter, who is one of the greatest uh, Tanakh scholars of the generation, and be like, I don't know. I don't know if he really got the Psalms. Yeah, Larry.
I would give you a little more credit. In fact, I would say this class is sort of an experience of both the world to come and the world today.
Aw, thanks.
This
Yeah.
is true.
Yeah. I mean, I will say in I did take a couple of Psalms classes uh in rabbinical school when I had a chance, right? One of the Psalms classes that I took was actually about Psalms as prayers and as ancient prayers, because the the book of Leviticus describes the sacrifices that were used in the ancient temple, but doesn't give any instruction about what the priests were supposed to say while they did all of these sacrifices. And other contemporaneous, like other ancient Near East um, accounts of temple worship, not of our temple, not of our God, but of pagan gods, they include the prayers and the formula, the like mantras or whatever that the priests had to say while they were doing the actions. And this is actually something that's been written about extensively. Um, Somebody wrote a book, I forget who, called The Silent Sanctuary or The Sanctuary of Silence or whatever. And this idea that unlike pagan temples where it was loud and cacophonous and the priests were saying magic incantations, in the Jewish version of that, the sacrifices were performed in silence. Well, maybe. Or maybe some of these psalms were actually written as prayers to be used in particular contexts or at particular times in the sacred service of God, in the worship of the temple. And not all of them, obviously, but some of them. And maybe there were in fact things to say that the priests knew and passed on in an oral tradition, but that didn't get written down. We don't know. We just don't know. What we do know is that there were two classes of priests. There were the Kohanim, who did the sacrifices themselves, and there were the Leviim, who helped with all of the temple um administration and cleanup and all the other aspects of the sacred service. And the Leviim were known to sing, but they sang these psalms outside of the temple, outside of the inner sanctum. They did not, the songs did not accompany the sacrifice itself as much as it accompanied the worshipers, right? It was a public, like a chorus for the people who came. So we know that. Anyway, so one of the classes that I took was about comparing Leviticus to Psalms
Hmm.
and seeing how those connected. And that was a very cool um approach. And then I took a class that was not directly only about Psalms, but it was a class on uh it was for my pastoral care um emphasis. My master's is in with a concentration in pastoral care and counseling. So I took a pastoral class that incorporated Psalms as one vehicle for pastoral care. And so we looked at a selection of Psalms. But this class is the first time that I've sort of in my life that I've like picked up the book of Psalms and I'm reading them one psalm a week and preparing the materials for this class and thinking about how the importance of the words of these psalms and also seeing how the psalms are used in our liturgy. So it's a much more systematic approach. Well, I don't know about systematic. It's a much more sort of step by step approach, psalm by psalm approach to the book of Psalms than I've ever done before, as opposed to saying, okay, let's look at a bunch of psalms of praise. Let's look at a bunch of psalms of lament. Let's look at a bunch of psalms of thanksgiving. And you can see when you do that, you can see the patterns that emerge. Like, oh, psalms of thanksgiving often have this same exact pattern. And then you might say, okay, psalms of thanksgiving might in fact have been used as part of the ritual for the Thanksgiving offerings, right? Because they have this particular set of this particular pattern. So then you can say, anyone who did a Thanksgiving offering offered the prayer in this kind of a pattern. And, and maybe you brought your own, or maybe you just paid the priest to say one for you. I don't know. Yeah, Larry.
I so much enjoy instead of learning about Psalms, learning the Psalm and sinking into it this way. It's a very different thing. It's instead of academic, it's allowing the Psalm to work on you instead of you trying to work on the Psalm.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
I
that's
really
right.
appreciate what you do here. I wonder why everyone in the world isn't watching this, enjoying this. This is wonderful.
Great. Yeah, well, thank you. And I also really enjoyed it. I find it spiritually meaningful. And we started during uh I mean I this it hasn't been an easy few years, and I found that the Psalms have been a great source of comfort. Like this psalm says, the life breath of me thirsts for you in a dry and weary land without water. And I do feel that we are we are collectively going through a dry and weary land
Yes, we
of
are.
spiritual parchness.
Desert.
And the Psalms do, I think, fill me up a little with the sense of spiritual connection and faith, and even just to say the fact that there are enemies and that we're struggling, like that feels to me like a really honest and spiritually fulfilling part of this as well. All right, so we will meet again next week at the same time, and we will look at Psalm 64. I'm almost done with the source sheet, so I'm hoping to get that out to you tomorrow. And then we'll meet the following week, which is August 5th. And then we're going to take a couple months off, as I'm going to take some vacation at the end of August. There are a couple of weeks that we could meet in early September, but I decided rather than do a couple weeks on and then more weeks off, we're just going to wait until after the Jewish
Yeah.
holidays are over, the fall holidays, and we'll meet back up again in mid-October, and then we'll pick back up our Psalms class then. All right.
Thank you. Bye. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Rabbi.
everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thanks.
Thank you. I
Ciao.
enjoyed this very much.
I'm
Thank
glad you're here. You can come anytime. Also, did you register for it?
I did. I
Okay,
did.
so
I'm
I'll
looking
make sure to
forward to
get
the
your email
materials.
and send the packet to you.
Thank you.
By the way,
Okay.
Rabbi,
Yes, Mark.
Jeffrey let me borrow a book called "It Takes Two to Torah." Are you familiar with it?
Yes.
It's quite. That's my evening reading.
Nice.
I'm on Leviticus now.
Yeah, they just did they just came Abigail Pogrebin um and what's his name?
Oh, what's I don't know his last. I forget
Dove
his.
Linzer.
Yeah, Jeffrey saw them. And he's got a
Yeah,
signed copy of the book.
they came to our region just recently. Yeah.
It's very interesting. It's a very different perspective, but pretty much on the same page.
Yeah. 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 Great. I'm glad you're enjoying it. I
Yes,
should get I should get a copy too.
thank you. We'll see you next week.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye.
So long, everybody.
So long.